Let's talk a little bit about form, plot, and structure. I know some of you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to plan this out because I think that I'm trying to be really original here, but you do need to have some sort of plan with it. And it's not just using a formula. So I think what some of you are worried about is that you think you're doing a formula, which is just shuffling nearly identical characters around in slightly altered situations from story to story. What I'm referring to is you need a form to your story. And you can often do this by borrowing elements from different genres, be it comedy, romance, action, horror. All of these different genres exist as sort of templates for you to help plan it out. If you go into this and you don't plan it out, then you might find that your video won't make sense. It'll be too confusing. So don't worry about borrowing some elements of genre, because you can be kind of original within the rules of that genre. You need to have some kind of conflict in your story, because trouble's interesting. Even though most of your life might be pleasant, very few people care about that. I have to be honest, very few people care. It's dull reading. It's also dull for videos, and it cannot be used for the whole story. For example, a ruined picnic makes for a much better tale than a perfect one. And you can often find trouble in the great themes of life, whether it's birth, love, sex, work, and death. Literally, as I showed you in the second example, the personification of death. That's interesting. That makes people want to watch it. You'll find that most dramas involve some type of desire with a danger or risk in order to fulfill that desire. Same goes for your character. A boring character is one who is essentially passive. So if your character is just staying around waiting for things to happen to him or her, very few people are going to care about that. Your protagonist needs to want things. They have agency, they have desires, they have individuality. You don't need to make everything spectacular. So you don't need to have murderers, crushes, vampires, etc. Because even a lot of drama can occur at a breakfast table rather than a spaceship. What do we typically see in different dramas? So you might have scenarios like man against man, so a battle between a protagonist and antagonist. Man against nature, so I'm thinking right here, Castaway with Tom Hanks, The Old Man, the Sea. Man against society, very popular in a number of science fiction films. Same thing with Man against Machine, with the Terminator.
This weapon will be powerful, versatile, and indestructible.
Man against God. So the Bruce Almighty stuff. Sometimes you have, people rebelling against the religion. Even man against himself. These ones are often the most interesting ones. And this might be something that you do in your videos. So you might have issues within the character's life and the character needs to resolve that. Once you develop this conflict, it must come to a climax. That is the point of highest tension in the story and the final turning point, which turns to a resolution. A story is about a single moment in a character's life that results in a choice after which nothing is the same. In this case, plotting then would be a matter of finding the decision points and scenes that lead to this final choice. Think of it like a war in which each scene is like a battle bigger than the last, in which case the crisis or the climax is the last battle and decides the outcome. Keep in mind, especially if you want to get a little bit in depth with this, what does your character win by losing the struggle, and what do they lose by winning it? Also, a good story is often a power struggle between equal forces, a protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist would be like the person that the audience is supposed to identify with. The antagonist could be another person, could be a situation, is against the protagonist. In this case, power can be multiple things. It can be physical strength, charm, knowledge, moral power, wealth, ownership, rank, and so on. Oftentimes they're mixed together. The important point here is that if the power is one-sided, suspense is lost. So think about when you're at a sumo wrestling match. If one person easily bowls it over, it's kind of boring, right? There's no tension there. Also keep in mind, a weakness can be just as powerful as strength if it prevents the protagonist from achieving his goal. So an example might be a little baby. A little baby's weak, but the parents need to sacrifice part of their lives in order to care for it. Another example of different types of power mingling together, I'm thinking about James Bond and often the femme fatales or female antagonists in that story. Even though those female antagonists may not be as physically strong as James Bond, they often use their intellect, their seductiveness, in order to try to fool Bond. So it makes for a really interesting story. Your characters will be making and breaking emotional bonds of trust, love, understanding, or compassion with one another. In this case, a connection may be a kiss or a glimpse. Keep in mind, not everything has to be over the top dramatic. A story that is just about conflict is shallow because humans have a need to win out over others and to belong to others. It's not as simple as black and white between your protagonist and antagonist. You have to think of your story as this type of check mark where everything sort of rises to a climax. Most stories actually fall under this check mark. Let me give you an example. We all know the story of Cinderella, right? So once upon a time, there was this poor woman and she was stuck with her evil stepsisters and stepmother, when all of a sudden she comes into contact with a fairy godmother. Okay, so now we have rising action. Things are getting interesting. The fairy godmother gives Cinderella a beautiful new gown. Cinderella is then able to go to the ball to meet with Prince Charming. But oh no, the clock strikes midnight and Cinderella has to run away. She leaves a glass slipper behind, and the prince has to go around and find whoever has this glass slipper. So the tension is rising. Is Cinderella going to be able to meet with Prince Charming again? The prince tries it on everybody, tries fitting the glass slipper on different people, doesn't work, goes to the evil stepsisters, doesn't work. But finally, Prince Charming slips the glass slipper onto Cinderella's feet. It fits. The climax. It's been resolved. Now Cinderella and Prince Charming can be together and be happily ever after. There's this tension that builds up along the story. The central tension. Will Cinderella be able to live a happy life or will she be miserable? And it all culminates to this final climax, the point of highest tension. And after that, everything gets resolved. So when you're plotting out along this check mark, you have to think about your different scenes. Your scenes are your building blocks of a story. They're going to take place in real time with dialogue and action. And in this case, confrontations, turning points, and crises cannot be summarized. Don't just be explaining everything away. You're going to have to be plotting out dialogue. You're going to have to be plotting out what your characters are doing. Because in this way, the reader is experiencing the tension of the moment along with the character. A short story, a short video cannot waste words, in this case, cannot waste film stock. And it's usually from the perspective of one character, raises a single conflict culminating in a climax or crisis, while a novel may have many. So again, we're thinking about a short story, a short film. For you engineers, learn to read a story, to plot a film as an engineer looks at a bridge or a building. If you don't want any spoilers, go and watch this film right now. This is Blade Runner. It's a classic science fiction film from 1982. It's about this guy, Deckard, who has to go and eliminate fake people, which they call replicants.
They slaughtered
A
20.
Blade Runner's job is to hunt down replicants. Manufactured humans you can't tell from the real thing.
What's this? Roy Batty. Probably the leader.
There was just one outfit making replicants that superhuman. The Tyrell Corporation.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
And so he's going around trying to find these rogue replicants. This all culminates to a climax where Deckard runs into the main replicant. Watch this short video. You'll see how a climax can be kind of complicated.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
Okay, so if you've watched the video, you'll see that the replicant saves Deckard by pulling him up. And then the replicant goes over what he's witnessed in his life, and then he dies. In this climax, the protagonist realizes that he's been trying to kill these very complex humans, basically. Even though they're bioengineered replicants, they're often more human than a lot of the other humans he encounters. And in this way, he learns the value of different types of intelligence. And then he goes and he runs away with the chief female character of the story. A lot of tension throughout the story. Is he going to kill the replicant? Is the replicant going to kill him? But it was a twist. And this way, the protagonist realized that maybe he was wrong for doing this.
Your character will spend most of the story pursuing an outer, plot-related goal related to the thing he wants. But what the story is really about, on a deeper level, is his growth into a place where he, first subconsciously, then consciously, recognizes and pursues his inner goal, the thing he needs.